It is Wednesday. You know what that means. It's time for Offside Hockey Talk. And we had to have this man back. There's so much crazy stuff going on. And I've been listening to Locked On Leafs all week long, listening to these guys talk about everything that's coming up. Leafs Nation, by the way, take your hand off the little red button. It's not time to panic or freak out. It's not August. Just chill for a moment, and we'll get into some of those topics here. But, of course, it's David Morassutti from Locked On Leafs joining me and my co-host Pete the Heat yet again. Guys, it's going to be a fun episode. But, David, how's the night treating you, man?
Nice treating me well. We're getting hot weather in Toronto. So it's summer. Summer's officially here. And, of course, the hotness doesn't apply just to the weather. Also, apparently also to the hockey debates around this city.
Yeah, there's a lot of hockey debates going on. Pete, how is everything treating you, my friend?
Everything's good except for this morning. There's a big explosion on the 401, which really screwed me up for work today and on the way home. But other than that, life is good. We got a lot to talk about, and yeah, it's gonna be a good show.
It's going to be a great show tonight, and we're going to kick it off with the Hockey Hall of Fame selection. And I see over David's shoulder right there, there is the number 31 Curtis Joseph jersey. Again, an omission here for the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I want to get to this one right away. What does he have to do? I mean, really, I guess you got to ask the question, whose cornflakes did he take a whiz in? Because obviously he ticked somebody off, because there's guys getting in to have less win percentage, less overall wins, worse statistics, but he's not there. And I mean, it's not like he hasn't done things or got great accolades to say that he should go into the Hockey Hall of Fame. So, David, I'll ask you, what's the deal here? Why is Cujo not in the Hall?
You know, I just wonder how much the committee is looking at accolades over actual performance on the ice.
Yep.
Right. You know, I was listening a little bit to, like, just after the announcement was made, Craig Button and Gino Reda were kind of debating things, and the idea of the 2 cups came up for Mike Vernon. And I'm like, I get that. I get he won Stanley Cups. I get that he was really good for that Detroit playoff run. But if you're sitting here and you're telling me in a playoff series, you had your pick of a goaltender between Curtis Joseph and Mike Vernon, you would pick Mike Vernon over Curtis Joseph?
Not a chance.
Like, are we like, is this where what it's come to? Like, Curtis Joseph is being brought down to the peg where Mike Vernon is ahead of him. Like, Tom Barrasso, I get maybe a little bit more because, you know, he was a good goaltender, but I'm sorry, Curtis Joseph had played at a higher level than those guys. Obviously the Olympic gold medalist, I know he got pushed over for Martin Brodeur during the tournament, but at the time he was par for par with Martin Brodeur as one of the better goaltenders in the NHL. Pat Roy didn't decide to go to the Olympics that year as well. But it's like, I don't know what other argument you can make for Curtis Joseph. If the Stanley Cup argument is the one that's missing, man, there's a lot of players then you're going to be excluding from the Hall of Fame because they don't have a Stanley Cup. And that, like, for me, I find that's like just astonishing that that's where it's come to, where like the first thing is he won 2 cups. Okay. Detroit Red Wings were like a rocket of a team, like a powerhouse team in those years. That, like, honestly, if you put Curtis Joseph in on that team, likely probably would have gone far. Now, I understand Curtis Joseph did go to Detroit after they had won a cup. That's part of what made my childhood very sad.
Yes.
I just remember being crushed. That was like the first time like a hockey player that I like grew up loving and like watching as a fan left, and like I didn't know what to do. Like, I'm a kid. What am I supposed to? How else am I supposed to react? My dad had to like explain to me like, you didn't get a new contract. And then I like growing up and you started hearing about the stories with Pat Quinn and all these things. But like Curtis Joseph, like you go back and you watch his highlight reels from his time with St. Louis, with Edmonton, and then Toronto, like he was among the top 5 goaltenders in the NHL in that time. And all those other guys are in the Hockey Hall of Fame. There's no debate about them. Apparently, Curtis Joseph, you have to have a conversation about every year as to why he should not be in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Dave, do you have a favorite memory of Curtis Joseph?
Favorite memory. Ooh, I remember there was a time where he got hurt and he was out for like the longest time. And I think Trevor Kidd like took over for him and he had like the nicest goalie pads. But Curtis Joseph finally came back and it was a significant injury. I think it was like a groin or knee injury or something like that. And he comes back and he did like a split, like the splits. And we were like all concerned whether he would be able to hold on, and just like didn't phase him. He was back at it, good again. So that's one. The other one, obviously a little bit newer, but when he came in against the Washington Capitals, because Martin Gerber decides to push a ref and get himself kicked out of a game, and Curtis Joseph comes in and stops all the shots he faces and has to go into a shootout cold.
I remember that. That was amazing.
Stopping Ovechkin. Like, there were times in the overtime where the Capitals were on a power play and he was stopping Alexander Ovechkin one time. It was like it was nothing. And the crowd was loving it. If I was in the building, that would have been like a tearjerk moment for me because I'm a huge Cujo guy.
Mm-hmm.
But like he was there. He went until like in his 40s to play.
Yeah.
Like he was in the hockey. He was in the NHL for so long. And so, like, that's something I remember when he came back to Toronto. It was just such a great moment. It's unfortunate the Leafs sucked at that time when he came back. But it was nice that he thought about coming back to Toronto because nobody probably ever thought he would ever come back to Toronto after the way things had kind of ended in his like first tenure with the team.
Now, I'll say this one. My favorite memory, playoffs against the Ottawa Senators. You'll probably both remember this.
Mm-hmm.
He gets bumped. The goal goes in. He freaks out. He goes to skate the top.
The referee
blows a tire, takes the ref out, and the ref is like, what are you supposed to do? But it was one of my favorite moments because he had that passion, the trademark passion that everybody wants to see. And that moment there, man, I really fell in love with him because he was hot and he was ready for whatever was coming his way, ready to throw with anyone. And yeah, I love that moment just because it boiled over. But yeah, man, those Ottawa Senator, playoff games with Curtis Joseph in net, chef's kiss, because we always lost to them in the regular season. But when it came to the playoffs, the Leafs finally got the job done there. Hopefully that's to come for the Leafs soon enough again. The other guy that wore a Leafs jersey that's omitted from the Hockey Hall of Fame again, and this may be a little bit of politics right here, is Alexander McGillney. I'd love to see Mo go in there. I think a lot of people would, given what he's done and his career. Do you think he is still deserving to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame, David, or is that a name that maybe is on the outside looking in for a while longer?
Well, I really hope that it's not because of because of his nationality, because that's kind of the going talk right now.
I think so.
I don't get this one. Look, Pierre Turgeon, the argument was he had the highest point total, the guy of all the players not in the Hall of Fame, and that was one of the reasons. And like Pierre Turgeon had a good NHL career, no snipe, like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But Alexander McGillney not getting in when I thought I made a pretty compelling argument on our last episode. Mike did as well. I think you just read everything. The documentaries that were done on his defection from the Soviet Union to come to the NHL and how that kind of sparked the movement there. Like just that. Like how does the Hockey Hall of Fame not look at that and say, you know what, that's something that should be celebrated and enshrined to the Hall? And let's not forget the guy was a really good hockey player. Many thought he was one of the best Russian hockey players when he came over in the 90s. Right? Like that should count for something. And hey, if we're gonna make the Stanley Cup argument, he did win a Stanley Cup. So they can't, like he does, and he's part of the Triple Crown, right? Like there's not many guys that have done that in their hockey careers. So I'm perplexed about McGillney a little bit more than I am about Curtis Joseph, just because McGillney had some really good seasons where he was like that year where he put up 76 goals in 77 games. You're like, that's just ludicrous. And people saying, well, Solani did. I said, well, yeah, Solani also did in 84 games. I get it. Solani was also a rookie, but I just think McGillney is getting he's not getting his due, and I really don't understand what argument the Hockey Hall of Fame could make right now, considering the players that have been let in the last few years. Like, let's be honest, the Sedins were also allowed in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and they didn't really, they had good careers. They were dominant those years where the Canucks were really contenders. But you can also make the argument that there's similarities between the Sedins and with McGillney, and he's for some reason not getting in. So that's the best one where I think you're going to start hearing the media train a little bit more each and every year. He doesn't go on, and like this is almost like when Pat Burns wasn't getting into the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
and he passes away, unfortunately, and it wasn't until after he passes away that he gets in. Like, I understand, and it's funny because Mike Gardner, when he made the announcements, he said, you know, everyone kind of gets in, like there's their time. It'll be their time when they come in. I'm like how long do you want guys to wait before they go in?
Yeah.
At what point does it start to make it look a little obvious what the Hockey Hall of Fame is doing in some ways?
Right. Now, let's start to talk about the guys that did make it in. We have like Henrik Lundqvist, Pierre Turgeon, Mike Vernon, Tom Barrasso. Do all these guys deserve to be in? Like, what's your thoughts on them?
Henrik Lundqvist 1,000% deserves to be in. Like, I think the biggest crime is he never won that cup with the Rangers. I thought he gave them their best chance. He just remember the consistency each and every year. There weren't many goaltenders that were doing what he was doing. Guy was also a 7th round pick. Nobody thinks of what he's going to do in his career. He was it took him a little bit of time to get to New York. I get that, but once he was there, like that Rangers team, you talk about the stability that market had. A lot of it had to do with what Henrik Lundqvist was doing. He won an Olympic gold medal. That Sweden team was just stacked. A lot of those guys are now getting into the Hockey Hall of Fame. So I just knew that was going to happen. Once you started to see like Sundin getting in, the Sedins getting in, you kind of start to see how things were progressing there. So yeah, he was one. Okay, I can see that. Tom Barrasso, when you win a Jennings Trophy, Vezina, like those help your candidacy along with winning cups and things like that. So Barrasso, I could definitely make the argument for why he should get in there. Mike Vernon, I thought that was a tough one just because his numbers weren't that stellar, right? Yes, he's got the cups. He had the Conn Smythe. Is like, I don't know if looking throughout his entire career, would I say that's a Hockey Hall of Fame career? And maybe that's why Curtis Joseph's not getting in, because people are probably looking at the back half of his career as a reason why he shouldn't get in. But Mike Vernon was the question mark for me. Ouellette, like, I don't see how you don't like that felt like a no-brainer for the women's category. I mean, there should have been more than one woman getting in.
Yes, I fully agree with you there.
You have 2 open slots. Like, are we trying to save? Like, are we not? Do we feel like there's not enough and you have to spread them out? I don't get that one. Like, there's gonna be it's gonna be easier when you're seeing the evolution of women's hockey right now. Don't worry. Once some of these ones eventually start to retire, it's going to be easy to put these women into the Hockey Hall of Fame. You're not going to have enough slots at this point. So that was disappointing that they only used one of the 2 there. Ken Hitchcock, yeah, that was a no-brainer there in Lacroix. Like, those were guys that did a lot of good things for a lot of markets. Lacroix, if you think of what he did with Quebec and Colorado, Hitchcock, I thought he was always a really good coach. He had some issues in terms of, things that he has done on the, like, with his teams, and his team's not always like how things ended with his teams, I would say. But I thought he was more than deserving. So it's the players, I think, like the 3, like the goalies is what I think everyone has the most problems with. Pierre Turgeon, there's a good case. But I still think there were better options out there, but I feel like they're also weighing when certain guys get in on how long they have waited to get in. And I don't like that. I don't like having to make players wait for longer than they should. But I guess that's how the Hockey Hall of Fame makes it a special award for someone to receive.
Right. There's one player that I would like to think is an absolute lock, but he obviously isn't. He can't make it in just yet because he's still playing. Do you guys know who that player is?
Ovechkin,
Out in Europe, owns a team.
Yager.
Yager.
Yeah. Like, when do you guys think this guy's gonna quit hockey and finally
Never.
make it in the Hall of Fame?
Oh man, can he play until he's 60? Because I think he'll try.
I think he wants to.
Yeah, I think Yager eventually. I mean, yeah, Yager's gonna be a no doubter when that happens. I think in the next couple of years, I think he'll definitely hang him up. I mean, the guy still has a chance to play hockey, plays in the country, plays to play for the team he owns. Let the guy have his fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he'll be an easy one when that eventually happens, for sure.
Yeah, he's an absolute lock to go. Probably first ballot.
Oh yeah, he'll be the headline of whatever class he eventually does get into.
Yeah, whenever he'll be the same age as a lot of the guys that have been waiting a long time to get in. Will be there finally. Be Jaromir Jagr. I want to switch gears here. Obviously, now we'll talk about some of the Maple Leaf stuff going on. The big one around Leafs Nation this week was the talk of buyouts, and everybody seems to be okay with whether it's trading or buying out Matt Murray. I would rather a trade. I don't want dead cap. Want every dollar the Leafs can spend on players to be spent that way. But if you go the buyout route, I understand it. The first year is not too shabby either. But the other guy that came out of Frank Saravelli and then was written about, talked about, thrown around, and just blew up was TJ Brodie. And I listened to what you guys said on your show, the Locked On Leafs podcast. By the way, go check it out and subscribe over on YouTube. I can't believe this. I'm listening to it. And I'm like, there is no one can give you a concrete, real reason other than the fact that, hey, the Leafs will save $5 million in cap space, but you're going to go spend that on another player that's going to probably cost you that much money, and A, will not know the system, B, may not pair well with the rest of the guys on your team, and C, is not TJ freaking Brodie. I like what Brodie brings. I know Pete does. He's got the jersey behind him, but I look at TJ Brodie and say, show me a guy on the Leafs that can break up 2-on-1s like TJ Brodie does. And I know we all hold our breaths when he lays down on the ice and tries to break up that pass. And some players have figured it out. Most guys haven't. But TJ Brodie on the Maple Leafs is a top 4 defenseman. I think on many teams, he would probably slot in as a 3-4 guy. Can play both sides of your defense. Can be on the penalty kill. Serviceable for 20-plus minutes a night. And you can elevate him if you need to. He's not there to get points either, folks. Just to let you know, he's kind of the defensive defenseman that allows the other guy to go do his thing. Hi, Morgan Riley, or anybody like Timothy Liljegren, whoever you want to play him with, really. But how do you come out and say, yeah, TJ Brodie, one of the most serviceable guys in the Leafs last year, that's the guy? Because you look and say, okay, well, they don't have very many players up front signed, so you go to the back end, and you're looking at the biggest cap eaters. Well, to me, it doesn't make sense because you're going to go spend that same money on one singular guy yet again. So it's a head scratcher to me.
Like the whole idea of how it came out too, like you heard Frank Saravalli talking about it, and I think it was Jason Gregor was also talking about it. And I get that TJ Brodie wasn't his best last year. He was still decent, right? He didn't have like a year where I felt like the Leafs, like he stole money from the Leafs and how he played.
No.
And like, you don't think that if a team that's looking for a defenseman wouldn't sign up to potentially trade for TJ Brodie instead of the Leafs having to eat dead cap at a time where every dollar the Leafs, like, you have to think about how much gymnastics the Leafs have had to do with their salary cap. There is no freaking way the Leafs are going to waste $2.5 million to buy out TJ Brodie and then have to be like, oh yes, but we still got to find another guy to replace him. And like, I don't know how much better the Leafs get by getting rid of TJ Brodie, right? Like, unless you're going younger and maybe getting a little more of a physical edge, I don't know what the Leafs could do with TJ, like with that potential, slot in the roster that's better than TJ Brodie, right? Like, who's out there on the open market that you can say, all right, this guy can easily replace TJ Brodie? I don't see it personally.
TJ Brodie is such an insulator. anybody you put him with, usually he helps elevate their game.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who it is. It can be anybody up or down. If they need a defense pairing, they got him right there. It's TJ Brodie. Stick him in, plug and play. He's good to go. And he doesn't complain. He does his job. You're right. You go out and you look, okay, who are they going to go get? You're going to go get, maybe we joked about a Carson Soucy. Maybe you go get, a Matt Dumba? These guys are on the open market. Okay, how much are you paying for those guys, though? And then all of a sudden, all that cap space that you're trying to open up is eaten up. And again, are you getting a guy that fits your system and can play what you need him to play? And at least with TJ Brodie, you know what you have. But you start opening Pandora's box to bringing in other guys, which they're going to do. I know that. But I don't think you subtract TJ Brodie to do it. And I think TJ Brodie would probably sign an extension to stay with the Leafs at a lesser cap hit because of his age.
Yeah, like I don't know what the Leafs. I mean, look, and some people are saying, "Oh, Brad Treliving didn't bring him back in Calgary." I also think that had a lot to do with the fact that they couldn't really afford him, and they wanted to go in a different direction with their blue line.
But what about the player himself too? Like I thought about that. Like maybe he wanted to go, right, and said,
True.
"No, I'm good."
And like maybe Calgary wasn't offering him what Toronto was offering, so he's like, "All right, peace out. I'm gonna go to Toronto. They're offering me exactly what I want," and he's a little closer to home. Some guys like that, and we found out that there are certain things that Toronto can offer that Calgary can't offer. A lot of these guys, right? And you see, so with Brodie, like if he has one more year left, you can if the offer for a trade isn't out there, I think Brad Treliving can live with having to have him for another season, and you just find ways to improve your blue line around TJ Brodie, right? Like they did a good job to get Jake McCabe around for a reasonable price over the next few years. You still got Morgan Riley. You still got Timothy Liljegren. You still have the options to play around with. Trading TJ Brodie creates a problem the Leafs don't need right now.
Well, the crazy thing, too, is you look at what can be done here with the Maple Leafs. They're sitting right now with, I believe, $9.1 million in cap space. If they use Muzzin's LTIR, which, believe it or not, I just learned something new, that you can be over for the LTIR going into the season with a guy going into LTIR. I didn't know that. But you have to be maxed out to the cap to get any of the benefits, you shall say, for that. So I learned something new on that. But anyways, with his cap money, it brings you up to something like, I think, $14 million. And then you go again, if you're able to move Matt Murray in a trade, you get yourself somewhere close to $19 million in cap space for the Toronto Maple Leafs if you factor all of that in, which is pretty significant for a team that needs to make some upgrades and add some things. You have to sign Samsonov and you have to sign a couple of other guys. But when you start looking at the UFAs on this team, you might be able to dabble a bit more, or you may even be able to be a player in the free agent market to bring in one of those other defensemen to insulate TJ Brodie and the rest of the crew. So I think we really just need to pump the brakes on the panic stuff and freaking out and, oh, this has to be done or this is the way it needs to be with a buyout, because we do have options and there is cap space to be had here. And I don't think any of us expect Matt Murray to be back with the Toronto Maple Leafs next season.
Do you think he's going to be bought out, or can we eventually trade him? Like, what do you think is going to happen here, Dave?
Well, I mean, they're going to use as much time as possible to avoid. I think they're going to try to avoid the buyout scenario. Mm-hmm. I really do. I just think they see that next year is such an important year on their salary cap with Matthews and Nylander looking for new deals, and then and the way that the cap is just the way the cap increases just have been so unpredictable in a lot of ways. Yeah, everyone's saying it's $1 million, $1 million, and they're saying a big jump is coming, but you can't guarantee that at this point, right? So if I'm the Leafs, you're trying your best to try to move him. You might have to get a little creative in how you do it. And the other problem is how much money he's owed on top of the cap. Like the cap isn't the issue. The issue is how much actual money he's owed. But I feel like the Leafs can figure out a way to get that deal done. Like there are teams that will still take him on. And look, he might still be able to play, or if you're a team that isn't fond of having Matt Murray, at least can say there's a good likely chance that he's not going to play, and you can just LTIR him. And like I think that's good. Like everyone's talking about how that's something the Leafs might even have to do themselves. They might have to put him LTIR if they can't move him. If they decide, you know what, we're not going to buy him out, we're just going to put him on LTIR, and that's going to be a tough one because we know people are getting a little suspicious of these LTIR moves when you look at what Mark Stone with Vegas, and you feel like if the Leafs try to do that, there's going to be some people that are going to raise their eyebrows at that one.
A lot of teams were doing a lot of digging on the Vegas Golden Knights this year and trying to see what the league would do about it. And the league fully backed Vegas, obviously, with the Stone situation, saying this is the way it is. No pun intended on the backward either. Yeah, I mean, we looked at the Joffrey Lupul situation a couple of years ago with Lou Lamoriello, and, you know, when he went over to Robidoux Island, so to speak, and he came out and said, no, I'm fine. And he quickly deleted that and had to, you know, had a retraction out there and say, you know, he didn't mean it and stuff like that. So with Matt Murray, where he was cleared and healthy for the playoffs, a lot of people are saying, well, maybe he comes into camp and he's not healthy, but it's going to be pretty hard to tell a guy who probably wants to play that, hey, you're not playing this year. Enjoy your money. We'll see you when you're a UFA. You can go sign somewhere else. I don't know if that's really going to fly with him either. So I think the trade and adding a sweetener to it might be the way to go.
Yeah, and yeah, you also think like if Matt Murray feels like he can continue his career, worst thing you can do is have a whole year of LTIR, then you're trying to get yourself another job. Yeah. There might be one or two teams that'll take a flyer, but it's so much tougher when you have that injury question mark. And now it's a headache that right now Kyle Dubas is probably saying, well, I don't have to deal with that one anymore. And I'm sure a lot of fans are probably not too happy that. And then that's why everyone's saying, you know what? They should be Kyle Dubas. It was his mess. He should be the one to take it back.
You're sending him over to Pittsburgh.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how that. Everyone's talking about Austin Matthews and, you know, William Nylander and things like that. I feel like the Matt Murray situation is the one that's going to have the most eyes on it in the next week when you look at the draft. Because if there is a trade involving Matt Murray, you have to think it's going to happen at the draft because there's no way this Leafs team is going to go into free agency without some idea of what the future of Matt Murray looks like, whether it's with the Leafs or it's on another team or on LTIR.
That's it right there.
Well, hopefully we get rid of him. I know I'd rather see Samsonov and Wool, but let's swing things over to William Nylander because he's got a contract coming out. What kind of term, what kind of contract are we looking at? Like, does he make 9 something, or does he just make under 9? I feel like 8.75 would be something good. What do you think, David?
I think when you're looking at the Nylander contract, the term is going to be the most important part.
Absolutely.
And I think you're going to want that 6 to 8 year commitment from him. You know, if he wants to get a raise and he's deserving of a raise, I just can't see. He's not a $9 million player. He might be if he got to the open market because the team is willing to pay that. But to me, he's in that 8.5 range for me personally, just because, you know, there are a lot of question marks still about his play at times. We can see the potential he has, but it doesn't always come out, right?
Yeah.
Defensively, he's made strides, but he's still got a lot of work to do in that area. And I don't know if, like, at this point of his career, how much he's going to change in that department too. So you got to be realistic with him. You got to tell him, like, look, you know, this is what you've done. We understand that everyone's feels like your contract is pretty much you've exceeded the value of your last contract. Mm-hmm. But can you exceed the value of your next contract too? Like, if we give you a raise, do you feel like you can exceed that value even more? I don't know if he can, right? You give him 8.5. I don't know if you sign him to 8.5, he signs and he's like, I feel like I got shortchanged. We got to go out and just show that you're going to keep, that you also were deserving of more than that, right? Like, if he feels like he's in like the 9.5 to 10, you got to trade him. In my opinion, you just can't. Mm-hmm. At some point, you've got to say to yourself, we are expecting more if you're going to want more money. And if he's asking for it, and if he's asking for an amount you're just not comfortable doing, you got to have that hard conversation, and you've got to decide, you know what, he's a good player, but you also have to be reasonable about your own internal cap of how much you can spend on him too.
Yeah, the hard line for me would be probably 8.9. And that would be the hard line for me. No, nothing over 9, not even close. And I start using guys like Jesper Bratt, who had a contract comparable or points comparable to him. And then you look over at Pasternak and say, look at this guy and what he's able to do and the number he is at. You're not anywhere near that type of player, nor do you do the physical aspect or the grittiness kind of that Pasternak can bring as well. So I say no to Nylander. Anything over 8.9, I'm not happy. I'd love 8.5 for 40 goals if that's what he's putting up every year. You know, goal scoring is one of the harder things to do. Yes, and that 8.5 is to say, hey, we understand what you can do offensively, but there's a lot of things that you leave on the table, whether it's playing on the wall, going in the corners, physicality, all that different stuff. That's not there for William Nylander. So 8.9 for me would be the hard line. And I think the Leafs will get it done. I think longer term will lock him up as well. Another guy I want to ask you about, obviously, is Austin Matthews. It seems like sunshine and rainbows lately about what's going to be going on here. The last time we talked was the RBC Open stuff where he kind of snubbed them and didn't go. And, you know, we were all wondering, is there trouble in Leafland here, you know, where he didn't show up for an event and all that stuff. But it seems like everything's good. They had a dinner. They laid out the plans. They didn't really talk contract parameters, but apparently there may be a willingness more so to maybe get an 8-year deal done, which is kind of not what any of us thought. But you start looking at all these stars that are signing these kind of deals. Maybe Matthews puts pen to paper on a 6 to 7 year deal, something like that. What is your feeling here with Matthews? Has the temperature kind of changed for the better for the Maple Leafs?
Well, when you hear that they're really pushing for that 8-year term, I think it's just a realization from the Leafs part that, you know what, Austin Matthews probably would love to be a trend center, but the Leafs also, you know, they made it easy on his last contract.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they haven't accomplished what they want to accomplish. And they got to ask Austin Matthews, what's more important, staying in Toronto or being a trend center on your next contract? There can be a little bit on the other. Like you can say, we'll make you the highest paid player, obviously before Connor McDavid's next deal comes up.
Yep.
But we have to do you want Mitch Martin around? Do you want William Nylander to stick around? Do you want us to improve the players around you? Right? That's a conversation that has to happen. Like Matthew Tkachuk signed for $9.5 million in his last deal. So yes, Austin Matthews deserves more than that, but how much more is like enough, right? Nathan McKinnon setting the new bar. He, in my opinion, set the new bar. How much more can you expect Austin Matthews to get paid than Nathan McKinnon, right? Like,
shred more is what I'd say, not too much.
No, right? And so you got to be realistic here. And look, if the Matthews camp is saying, well, you want us for 8 years, that means you're getting our 8 best years. We want you to pay premium for that. Sure, okay. Like you're not going to shortchange Austin Matthews in that regard, but at the same time, you're not going to go into that $14 million range like I heard a little bit there. Like, no, that's not happening. And like, if that number is closer to 13, which is what many are suggesting, it's got to come with 8 years, in my opinion. If he wants that short term to kind of reset himself, I'm sorry, then you're taking less than we're not giving you that much of a pay increase, because then, you know, if you're going to reset again, it's how much can you realistically expect to reset on your deal after that, if that's the plan, his plan of action.
Yeah, I mean, I see that a lot. Like I said to you before, you know, this may be the new operandum for some superstars to sign these short-term deals. I love the NBA, NFL, and the MLB, right? To make more in your window of earnings, and that's what they do. They open it further by doing that, signing those shorter deals. But I agree with you. The Maple Leafs are going to be backed into a corner. They're going to say this is option A or option B. and you can't have it both ways. So figure it out. If you want to stick with us for 8 years, we'll pay the premium for your 8 years, yes. But if you're coming at us with a shorter term deal, slight increase, but nothing crazy. You won't be the highest paid player in the league. And, show us your loyalty, basically, and we'll show you the money. Is basically what the Leafs are probably saying. The easy way to put it.
This is where the structure of contracts in the NHL are so dumb. Unlike almost every other sport where a player and a team have an option on a contract. Auston Matthews, we're going to give you an 8-year deal, but maybe after year 3 or 4, you may want to option, or we may want to option out of that contract and try to do this again. But at least there's that framework that we have 8 years. So that, okay, we can rework this after a few years. Like the NH, there's a lack of creativity. Like, I don't know if it's they're trying to save their general managers from, the fact that they can't handle these sort of contracts. I don't know. If it works for baseball, if it works for if it works for MLB, NBA, and in some cases the NFL, and the NFL, it's even better because you can reduce a cap hit by if you can defer salary and things like that. They can do so many creative things to make things work, and it allows for so much player movement and excitement in the offseason. The NHL really doesn't do the Stars any favors because it almost feels like, oh, you have to sign for 8 years. You have to sign for 8 years. But then in the other leagues, like, well, you can sign for a long-term deal, but we're also going to give you a chance to opt out and see if maybe, our salary cap is increased. You're the reason why, in a lot of ways, the salary cap increases. So it'll give you another chance to add more money. But also in most cases, those players stay with the teams because they want to be there. So I feel like that's something the NHL, that should have been something discussed so long ago to have those options, right? And I just don't understand why the league doesn't want to do those sort of things to help teams, players, and in a lot of ways themselves with the way these contracts are done.
No, I fully agree. So the Leafs are jumping in for an assistant coach on the bench. And I want to know, why is it anybody other than Mitch Love? Because I think that's just a marriage that's waiting to happen. I'm sure the Leafs will do their due diligence, talk to other people. But I think Mitch Love is going to be the guy with Sheldon Keefe. And it may be just the heir apparent when Sheldon Keefe may get fired. At least Brad Treliving has his guy that he's kind of brought along, brought through the ranks, watched progress, win the AHL Coach of the Year 2 times in a row. To me, that just makes the most sense. I'm wondering if I'm out to lunch on that, or that's probably the guy they're going to go with.
Well, the only way that I feel like that might not happen is if he decides, I'm going to stay in Calgary and take an assistant job on the Flames bench. But you can't ignore the history with Brad Treliving, right? And what he's accomplished there. And if you're Brad Treliving and you hire Mitch Love, you can give him that look and say, you'd probably be the next guy in line if we decide to move away from Sheldon Keefe. That's why a lot of assistants take certain jobs in some ways. They kind of know what the deal is without even saying it themselves. Now, if they do hire Mitch Love, for a fact that conversation is going to happen almost right away. When is just like it was when Sheldon Keefe was brought in with the Marlies, he was right there behind Mac Babcock. When is Kyle Dubas going to pull the trigger and bring in Sheldon Keefe? It's unavoidable, but that's the business. You're not getting the job done. There's somebody else that your team feels like can get the job done. So yeah, Mitch Love makes sense. I just wonder if they're want to look at other assistants. Like, look, Sheldon Keefe is going to have his input too. He might say, I don't like certain things that Mitch Love does. It depends on how much the front office staff is going to take Sheldon Keefe's input on this next hire too.
That's very true. Well, we'll look forward to that one. All right, so we have a new thing going on here. It's the 5 burning questions. Just a quick answer. Doesn't need to be long-winded. 1 word if you want to. We'll blaze through them. First one right here. Connor Brown back with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Would you?
Yes, I would. He coming off a knee injury. He loves Toronto. I know a lot of people who know Connor Brown, and he loves being in Toronto. So would not say no to that one.
Okay. Biggest snub for the Hockey Hall of Fame?
McGillney, for sure.
Agreed.
All right. Pierre-Luc Dubois, landing spot.
Ooh, I'm gonna go with the LA Kings.
I thought
I
so.
think they can blow away if they offer a deal that I've been hearing, like that we've kind of been hearing around, what they can offer in terms of young assets to really help Winnipeg out. I think if that's the deal, I think Winnipeg will definitely ship them off to LA, and I think that could be a match made in heaven for LA and Dubois.
Interesting. I like it. Okay, so who for the draft? Who do you think the Leafs take at 28?
Oh, yeah, it really depends on what the Leafs are looking to do here. And look, it also depends if the Leafs have that pick as well,
Yeah.
right?
True.
We'll presume that they do.
Ooh. A lot of people are kind of it's really tough because there's not a lot of clarity about which guys will fall where, right? And so I'm trying to remember the play. I took Fisker Molgaard was the guy that I put in that slot. He's a center. He's actually from Denmark, but plays in the SHL. Not a terrible player. Got really good skating, good work ethic, willing to get in the dirty areas. But his offensive game hasn't fully come along, so some are wondering if that's going to reduce his potential. Another name I've heard is Oliver Bonk, the defenseman out of the London Knights. We know that the Leafs are trying to beef up their blue line a little bit, so it wouldn't surprise me if they decide to do that. I think they're going to get if you find a guy with a little bit of size and a little bit of, I think this is where you're going to start to see the shift a little bit in looking where the Leafs go. I think you're going to see some of the little more bite, a little more size. So those are kind of the areas I'm looking at there. But we're actually going to try to get some draft experts on our podcast to get a little better idea as well. So like that's kind of I like if I had to say today, I put Fisker Molgaard as my guy, but the more I think about where the Leafs are going, I don't know if that's the fit they're going to want to go with.
All right. Well, I'll say one name that we've been told by a couple of draft experts we've had on in the past week was Gavin Brindley.
Okay, I've heard his name too. So it's so tough when you get into that range of like the 20, because there's guys who teams will reach, right?
Yeah.
Who are like second rounders, but you know what? Like they could fall, they can move up into that round, or in a lot of ways, there's guys that teams feel like, all right, this is someone that should have been picked a lot earlier, and he's fallen to us, so we're gonna go and grab him. So. Yeah, I feel like a center defenseman is where the Leafs are going to go in this draft.
All right, and the last one here, one Leafs UFA that stays.
That stays. Well, for the longest time, I thought it was going to be Luke Shen. It looks like that pipe dream might be ending, although it's still tough to gauge right now. That stays. I'm going to go with David Kampf.
Ooh, okay.
I'm going to go with David Kampf. I know CJ on TSN radio said that it's likely that Achari, O'Reilly, and some of the other guys likely don't come back. I think it's maybe a little truly too. Maybe that's just agents saying we haven't had a lot of talk with the Leafs, and that's kind of where the ideology is coming from. But I feel like David Kampf, he's a guy that if you let go, you have to really hope that you can find someone to replace him. And so like he's someone that I feel like could be back. But Noel Acciari would be the one I'd want back.
Yes, sure. I think we'd all want Noel Acciari.
Yeah.
And to touch on your David Kampf pick there, the Pontus Holmberg train is running wild too, that he's going to be the guy to replace him. The issue that I have with Pontus Holmberg, and I said it many times throughout the year on our show, the face-off percentage with Pontus Holmberg, especially if he's going to be a penalty killer and in your bottom six expected to take those defensive draws, needs to be a lot higher. So unless he's going to the Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, John Tavares school of faceoffs this summer and really up in that game, I don't think he's ready for that primetime slot of what David Kampf brought last year. And some people may be like, whoa. There is a reason why they put him out there on 3-on-3 overtime to get possession of the puck and then put the big boys out, because he was very good at doing those things.
Now, I will say Manny Malhotra, who they do have on the coaching staff, knows a thing or two about winning faceoffs.
Yeah, true.
How much players can improve in the faceoff dot but there's players who just have that instinct already that it's so hard to teach. David Kampf is one of those guys. And he's proven that he's no slouch offensively. Like, he's got some offensive game to him. Like, I think that, like, when you look at that fourth line in the playoffs of him, and then you can put him with anyone. Like, him and Lafferty were a pretty good combo because they play with pace, they move the puck pretty nicely. You pair those three with someone that's a pretty good. Even with a Pontus Holmberg on the wing, I think that's a pretty good fourth line. Like, why give yourself a little more flexibility where can never have too many centers in your lineup and guys that can kind of move and jump around too.
No, you're 100% right. And I know guys that have taken the entire summer and worked every single day at some point of the day on their face-offs. I mean, one guy was Austin Matthews. Actually, he took a whole summer and studied Sidney Crosby's draws, and then he came back that next season and was just dynamite on the dot. So it can be done. I mean, Austin Matthews, different breed, highly skilled athlete. Obviously, no Pontus Holmberg, but we'll see. But David, I want to thank you very much. You always take time to jump on. This is week 2 of having you on. Really appreciate it. So again, everyone, make sure you check out Locked On Leafs. They're every single day talking about the Maple Leafs. Subscribe to them over on YouTube. The guys are great. And look, he's over here talking to us too about the Leafs yet again. So David, thank you very much for jumping on, man.
Thank you guys for the invite. I will always say yes if I'm available. So we are to make this work.
No worries. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know what this is. It's Offside Hockey Talk, where the Maple Leafs and hockey come to talk.